All right, hello and welcome. This is the Dancing Strikes Bladedancer build guide for 1.1. I know that says 1.0 at the top. That's just the video I'm about to show you. This guy's going to go over the build in general, how it works, but also the changes for 1.1. But let's go ahead and look at some of the video. This is 1.0 footage. I can't show 1.1 footage yet, but the build is really almost identical stylistically. There's really almost no changes. And, oh, I forget his name, but he's really happy about it. Why can't I remember? Oh, what's the dude's name from the Will Smith show? But anyway, yeah, this build is definitely strong. It's a good one, but it is more meant for people who want sort of a brawler type play style, where maybe the Shadow Dagger Bladedancer or Shadow Dagger Falconer are not melee enough for them. They want a really good melee option. This is going to be a solid choice that still uses the Shadow Dagger setup and uses Dancing Strikes, which is a really cool skill and feels very fluid to play once you get used to it. At first it's kind of awkward, but once you get used to it, it's really fluid to play. This is like one of my sneaky favorite builds. I don't play it much because it's hard to choose it over Falconer or Bladedancer when like I'm racing or anything like that, like a league start. But every time I go back to this build, I really enjoy it. As someone who's not too concerned about like the absolute best performance, just wants something that's going to do really well, going to be able to do all the content, and feel good. This is definitely an alternative option to the other Shadow Dagger setups. So, as you saw in the video, let's go go ahead and play a little bit more of that. The general idea or concept here is you're going to shift towards enemies, and then you're going to start doing your Dancing Strikes. And your Dancing Strike is going to hit enemies, and it's going to apply Shadow Dagger stacks, which are going to eventually cause Shadow Dagger procs, which are those big crits that are happening, and they're going to kill enemies. There's a couple other skills that are being used here, but most of them are procced off of the Dancing Strikes. Like Umbrell Blades to proc off Dancing Strikes. Smoke Bomb is used for more damage and defense, and Decoy is used for more defense. We already talked about Shift. And then there's also Shadow Cascade that's used in the background as a proc. Okay, let's talk about the pros and cons of this build. I've already mentioned one of the cons, which is it's just not quite as good as two of the other Shadow Dagger builds, like objectively, but still good. But if you want to know the other things, because you're like, this still looks cool to me, and I'm still thinking I'd enjoy this playstyle. Pros are, it's got a unique playstyle for sure. The way that Dancing Strikes move is different than anything else I've ever played with. And that's a positive, not a negative, once you get used to it. It's a solid monolith farmer. It's relatively fast, does good damage. It's tanky with good gear. It's tankier this patch than it was last patch. It has high movement speed, and it has very good damage with buffs that are up, because there's get some seriously good buffs from Dancing Strikes itself. Cons, it is vulnerable when not moving, but not as vulnerable as it used to be. Good news is also Dancing Strikes itself is a movement skill, meaning that when you are using Dancing Strikes, you are moving. So you're moving almost all of the time anyway. But if you are not moving, like you're picking up gear or something, you do lose a 20% damage reduction buff from moving from the passive tree. Buffs are difficult to manage this build. This is a very difficult to manage buff system, especially if there's not a lot of density or an enemy with a small hitbox. Because it has a short duration that it gets refreshed every time you hit, and it's easy to miss with Dancing Strikes. Just sometimes it doesn't go where you think it's going to go, or even doesn't hit when it looks like it should have. I don't know why, but that sometimes happens, and you lose the buff, and you gotta like, kind of reset it because it's a stacking buff. When you get all the buffs up though, it's really strong, so that's the trade-off. Melee playstyles are generally very dangerous in Last Epoch, because it's harder to avoid some of the telegraphs when you're sitting in melee, and also any melee attacks are going to actually attack you, whereas if you're ranged, they don't, and you can just laugh at them as they try to chase you around. So anytime you're going to play a melee build, just bear in mind that's a con. Dancing Strikes can be hard to control. It's gotten better over time. It's actually quite fun, but like I said, it is definitely very possible to miss attacks and lose your buffs, and that can be frustrating. The dual wield setup takes more damage. It's about 9% now more. It's less than it used to be, so not really that big of a deal overall, but it's a thing to consider, especially as a melee build. Okay, let's talk about the skills. There's not a ton of changes here. The big thing that Dancing Strikes does outside of proccing Shadow Daggers is it gives you a bunch of buffs from Rhythm. We only take 8 stacks since we could take 10, but it's hard to maintain 8, so there's no point in taking 10. You do get 3% more global damage from this for each stack, so it's 24% if you're at full. You also get another 5% from here per stack, so that's what, 40. You get 30% more dodge rating per stack, which is a crazy amount of dodge rating, and you get 20% global crit multi, so it's another 160 global crit multi. Since they are global, they all apply to Shadow Daggers, except for this, which doesn't need to, it just applies to you. So this is a ton of buffs it gets, which is why you can see the potential of this build is tremendous if you could keep these up consistently. The downside of it, though, is it's got a 2-second duration. It's just easy for that to fall off. The big change that happened this patch is Hidden Blade was like a 10% chance on every use of Dancing Strike's attacks, is now with investment of 2 points, 100% chance on the first stack. So every 3 you're guaranteed it. Because of that, we take both points in it, and it is quite a bit stronger in that regard. We will be doing Shadow Cascades a lot more consistently, which will improve the damage across the board generally, or specifically. As far as the other skills, Umbrell Blades is actually used through shift. You use shift and it causes an Umbrell Blade through this node here and this node. So you're going to be shifting quite a bit to try to get that up, and when you do, you will get it to spin like you see in the video from Cacophony of Steel, and that will cause Shadow Dagger stacks. We also do turn it into a cold skill, which does not matter for Shadow Daggers. Shadow Daggers maintains its physical properties, which is what we want it to do, but this allows us to use this as our source of chill, which makes enemies attack less quickly. Speaking of shift, we already talked about what this does over here. We also get a lot of dodge from shift, and we get a kill threshold, which is not actually super important for this patch, but hey, it's something. But we get a lot of speed from this as well. We get a 50% move speed buff every 1.5 seconds, so shift's a really good movement skill. Shadow Cascade is providing us with more Shadow Daggers. It's also providing us with mana, which is really great. And Frailty Chance is our source of frailty. And Smoke Bomb, its primary function is to give us Smoke Blades, which gives us a ton of added damage. Since Shadow Daggers is both a melee and throwing tagged skill, we get both, so you can have up to 160 added damage if you've been in for 4 seconds. It's also a good defensive option. All right, let's talk about the passives. We only have one change to talk about here, which is Skios Synthesis. And this needs to be talked about on every Shadow Dagger build. This is no different. This now gives a 4-point bonus that is a 50% multiplier to our damage to rares and bosses, which is huge. It's a tremendous buff for this build. We are much better in single target now. We love this. The only thing we don't love about this is its placement on this node, Skios Synthesis, because it's confusing, because Shadow Daggers do not scale with shadow damage. So having a Shadow Dagger buff on a node that provides shadow damage is confusing to players, and it's going to cause players to erroneously scale shadow damage and not get any benefit from that. Don't be one of those folks. Don't be one of those folks that gets bamboozled by this. Do not scale shadow damage on your Shadow Dagger build. You will not get anything from it. All right. We've already talked about the skill rotation generally. Mostly what you're trying to do here is you're trying to shift to get towards enemies that also get up your Umbrell Blades, and then you're trying to dance. This is all about the dance. You're dancing all over the place, all over the battlefield, all over the enemies. Use decoy as a way to keep enemies off of you, but your big buff is Smoke Bomb to do lots and lots extra damage, and also get some nice defensive buffs from that. As far as gearing goes, this is similar to before. We used 2 Smoke Weavers in this build before. We still do. I believe we did. If we've not, we do now. We definitely use 2 Smoke Weavers, which its biggest benefit is the dodge rating. It's got a ton of dodge. It makes it very, very difficult to get hit. The big addition here by the end game is Carcinization of Momentum, which provides at level 100 20% move speed, which is awesome. 30% increased armor, plus 6 to all attributes, and plus 6 vitality. This is just a solid all-around unique that gives us a ton of move speed we did not have access to before because swiftness did not exist. What's up, Naked? How you doing, man? Breaking your meeting? All right, Aspirational has 2 further additions. These are being added to every Shadow Dagger build and many builds across the game. Null Portent gives us great leech, increased health, physical resistance, and 20% damage reduction as long as we have enough resistance, which we will. This is just a straight up, it's just straight up better than Wings of Argentus for builds like this, because it's got the same damage reduction, but also the health, leech, phys res. It's hard to beat it. And then Nihilus, you're gonna see us in a lot of aspirational setups, because if you roll it well, it's got insane stats, increased health, mana, move speed, plus 2 all skills, mana regen, more armor, all res. Downsides, if you evade a lot, not great, but we don't really evade a lot with Shadow Daggers builds because they have so much move speed, it's probably not even worth it. And shift is amazing. You do need to get legendary potential on it, and you definitely want increased dodge rating because the increased dodge rating on the amulet is tremendous. And the stats on this can roll negative. They have a high range that includes going negative, and so you can get totally screwed by one of these if it drops and actually makes your build worse. So you have to be very careful making sure that the rolls are good enough to be worth your time, and then also get the dodge rating on, or else it's probably not worth it. So this is very much a chase item. As far as blessings go, the big change is we've added all res here to make it easier to get our resistances, and we've done that because we used to do crit avoidance, but now we don't need to because blind has changed. Blind used to be 50% chance to reduce crits from an enemy. Now it is they cannot crit if they are blinded, and since we get blind from Smoke Weaver and we wear 2 of them, pretty much everything is blinded once it's been hit. So the only downside, if it hasn't been hit yet, you don't have any defenses against it. So if you are playing hardcore, you might want to reconsider this. You might want to think about getting crit avoidance. Kind of up to you, but it's definitely a little bit riskier if you walk in, you haven't hit an enemy yet, and they hit you. You could get crit, that's double damage. Kind of yikes in hardcore. Softcore, not that big a deal. Idols are the same as they were. Fizz Pen with Shadow Daggers, increased health with either elemental resistance or shred armor duration, whatever balance of these you choose is personal preference and need. If you need more elemental resist, take that. If you need to be tankier, take health. If you need more damage, take Fizzpen. And if you don't need more elemental, just take armor shred duration. And then we want double health idols here if we can. If we need more resistances, though, we can fill that with resistance as well. That is pretty much everything. Yeah, that covers everything. We do have a new loot filter system. This generates a loot filter now when you click it based upon our planner. So if I change my planner, it should change the loot filter as well. So it should be an easy way for you guys to get updated loot filters compared to before. That's a really nice change. All right, that covers everything. I hope you enjoy the build if you decide to play it. If you're looking for something that's unique, but still is pretty fast and follows a Shadow Dagger playstyle, this is probably what you're looking for. Please let me know how it is for you if you decide to go that way. And if you have any questions, come hang out with me in chat or feel free to ask in the comment section. Thank you so much for watching. Have a great time with Cycle 1.1, and I'll see you all again real soon.